The peonies were perfect. That was the first thing Beverly Hartwell noticed when she stepped through the door of Rosewood Private Dining that Friday evening. The white peonies, arranged exactly as she had specified, cascading from tall glass vases in soft, loose clusters that caught the candlelight and glowed like something from a dream. She had driven 40 minutes to the florist in Greenville herself to approve that specific variety, had brought a photograph on her phone to make sure the stems were cut at the right angle, had tipped the delivery boy $20 extra to handle them carefully. That was Beverly. Every detail, handled. She paused in the doorway and let herself take it in. The linen tablecloths she had ordered from a supplier in Charleston, the hand-calligraphed name cards she had stayed up until midnight finishing 3 weeks ago, the candles arranged at precisely measured intervals, the soft jazz quartet she had booked 6 months in advance, playing something warm and unhurried from the far corner. 14 months of planning, $78,000, every last cent of it hers. She smoothed the front of her navy dress, the one she had bought specifically for tonight, not too formal, not trying too hard, and walked into the room. "Mom!" Nathan appeared at her side almost immediately, and Beverly felt the familiar rush of warmth that still caught her off guard sometimes, even now that he was 31 years old with his father's jaw and his father's way of standing slightly sideways when he talked. "Everything looks incredible. It came together nicely," she said, because she had learned long ago not to say I worked myself half to death on this, even when it was true. He kissed her cheek and moved away quickly. Someone was calling his name from across the room, and Beverly watched him go with that particular ache she had carried for 6 years now, ever since Ray died. The ache of loving someone who was always just slightly out of reach. Ray. She thought of him briefly, sharply, the way she always did in moments like this. He would have been standing right beside her tonight, squeezing her hand, whispering something in her ear that was probably inappropriate for a rehearsal dinner. He would have made her laugh. He would have made everything easier simply by existing. But Ray was gone, and Beverly was here alone, and the peonies were perfect, and that was enough. She found her seat at the end of the table near the window and settled in, watching the room fill. She had used the money Ray left to pay for all of it. That was the thing no one knew. Not Nathan, not anyone. When Ray died, he had left her with a modest life insurance policy, the paid-off house on Caldwell Street, and one savings account with $78,000 that the two of them had been building together for 20 years, their travel fund, their someday fund for the trip to Portugal they kept pushing back, the cottage rental in the Scottish Highlands, the slow train across Canada that Ray had clipped from a magazine and stuck to the refrigerator with a magnet shaped like a lighthouse. Beverly had sold the house on Caldwell Street 8 months after he died and moved into a smaller apartment across town. She told people it was because the house was too big for one person, which was true, but not the whole truth. The whole truth was that she needed the savings account untouched, kept safe, for Nathan, for his future, for whatever he needed. When Nathan called her 2 Februaries ago, voice bright in a way she hadn't heard in years, saying, "Mom, I proposed," and she said yes, Beverly had felt something open up inside her chest like a window in a stuffy room. And when, 3 weeks later, he had sat across from her at her small kitchen table looking slightly embarrassed and said Savannah and I were talking, and with the wedding costs, we're trying to figure out... Beverly had not let him finish the sentence. "I'll take care of it," she had said. "All of it. This is my gift to you." She had meant it completely. Savannah arrived 20 minutes into the evening, which Beverly noted but said nothing about, because Beverly had spent 58 years learning to say nothing about a great many things. She came through the door in a red dress cut low at the back, her dark hair swept up, a smile arranged on her face that hit every person in the room at precisely the right wattage. Warm for Nathan's college friends, charming for the older relatives, practiced and bright for everyone else. She was 28 and effortlessly beautiful in the way that made rooms rearrange themselves around her without her having to ask. Beverly watched her move through the space. In 14 months, Savannah had never once asked Beverly about her life before Nathan, had never asked about Ray, had never asked what Beverly did with her Tuesdays or whether she still played piano or what her favorite book was. She asked Beverly's opinion on centerpieces and catering menus, always with a slight air of consultation rather than genuine curiosity, the way you might ask a contractor whether the tile grout should be ivory or cream. Input welcome. Attachment not required. Beverly had told herself it was just generational, that young people were different. that Savannah loved Nathan, and that was what mattered. She told herself a lot of things. For the first 40 minutes, the evening was exactly what it was supposed to be. Wine poured, appetizers circulated. Nathan's college roommate told an embarrassing story that made everyone laugh. Gerald Caldwell, Savannah's father, held court at the far end of the table with the energy of a man who considered every room a stage. Broad gestures, loud laugh, the kind of confidence that Beverly had learned to recognize as the paper-thin variety that crumbles under the slightest actual pressure. Sandra Caldwell, Savannah's mother, sat beside him saying very little, refilling her wine glass with the quiet efficiency of long practice. Beverly was near the window, mid-conversation with Dorothy, her younger sister who had driven up from Columbia for the weekend, when she heard it. She wasn't eavesdropping. That was the thing she would return to later, in the small hours of sleepless nights. She wasn't leaning in or straining to hear. The words simply reached her, the way sounds sometimes do in a room with good acoustics and the wrong configuration of bodies. Savannah was standing 6 feet away with her back to Beverly, speaking to Sandra in a low voice, pulled tight with irritation. Doesn't know how to let go. She's been micromanaging every single decision. The flowers, the menu, even the seating chart. This is supposed to be our wedding, Mom, not her personal project. Beverly went still. The conversation she was half-having with Dorothy continued somewhere at the edge of her awareness, but she had stopped processing it. I know, sweetheart, Sandra murmured. I've tried to be patient, but honestly, I'm exhausted. Every time I turn around, she's already decided something without asking me. I'm the bride. It should feel like my wedding. Beverly set down her wine glass very carefully on the windowsill. She controls everything. She always has. I don't know how Nathan stood it growing up. Later, Beverly would think, if Savannah had stopped there, maybe the evening would have recovered. Maybe Beverly would have absorbed it quietly, the way she had absorbed so many things over so many years, and filed it away in that place inside herself where she kept everything that hurt too much to examine directly. But Savannah turned around, and she saw Beverly standing there, perfectly still, with the expression of someone who has heard every word. For one suspended moment, neither of them moved. Then Savannah's face did something Beverly had never seen it do before. The practiced warmth dropped away completely, like a mask slipping, and what was underneath was not embarrassment or remorse. It was calculation. A fast, cold recalibration. Savannah stepped forward. Beverly. Her voice was low and controlled, pitched to carry no further than necessary. I think we need to talk. Savannah, Sandra began softly. No, Savannah did not look at her mother. Her eyes stayed on Beverly. I've been holding this in for months, and I'm done. This is supposed to be the happiest weekend of our lives, and instead I feel like a guest at my own wedding. The jazz quartet was still playing. Conversation still flickered around the table, but the people nearest them, Dorothy, Nathan's roommate, the 2 bridesmaids closest to the window, had grown quiet, attention drifting toward them with the involuntary pull of human nature toward conflict. I have done everything possible, Beverly said carefully, to give you and Nathan. That's exactly the problem. Savannah's voice sharpened. You've done everything, without asking, without considering what we actually wanted. You made this about you. Beverly felt the blood drain slowly from her face. The flowers are mine, Savannah continued, each word distinct and deliberate. The venue is mine, the guest list. You added 7 people we didn't ask for because you felt like it. And now you're standing here acting like we owe you something for every cent you spent. She paused. You're not welcome here tonight, Beverly. I'd like you to leave. The music did not stop, but the room did. Beverly did not look at Savannah. She looked at Nathan. He was standing 8 feet away, a glass of bourbon in his hand, his face turned slightly down and to the left. Not toward Beverly, not toward Savannah, not toward anything in particular. Just angled away. The way you angle away from something you don't want to be responsible for witnessing. He did not say her name. He did not take a single step forward. He stood there with his father's jaw and his father's eyes, and made himself a stranger. Beverly picked up her small evening bag from the back of the chair beside her. She straightened the strap over her shoulder. She turned to Dorothy, who was staring at her with an expression of open-mouthed shock, and said quietly, "Excuse me." Then she walked toward the door. 16 people watched her go. She did not hurry. She did not stumble. She did not give any of them, Not Savannah, not Nathan, not Gerald Caldwell with his paper-thin confidence. The satisfaction of seeing her fall apart. She saved that for the car. She sat in the Rosewood parking lot for 22 minutes. The crying was not the graceful, dignified kind. It was the ugly kind. The kind that comes from somewhere deep and animal, that has nothing to do with composure or pride, and everything to do with something breaking that had been holding for a very long time. She pressed both hands flat against the steering wheel and let it come, because there was no one to see it, and nowhere to go yet, and sometimes the body just needs to do what it needs to do. She cried for the rehearsal dinner. She cried for the $78,000. She cried for the 14 months of binders and spreadsheets and late nights at her kitchen table with a glass of water and a calculator and a steadily shortening list of things she hadn't done yet. She cried mostly for Ray. I wish you were here, she thought. I wish you were here to tell me what to do. But Ray wasn't here, and Beverly Hartwell was 58 years old and had been managing alone for 6 years and was not going to sit in a parking lot crying indefinitely. She wiped her face with the inside of her wrist, took 3 slow breaths, opened her purse and found the navy blue binder she carried everywhere. The wedding binder, organized with 17 labeled tabs, one for each vendor relationship, each contract, each payment confirmation. She turned to the first page. Client name, Beverly Ann Hartwell. Her name, everywhere. Every line, every signature, every billing address, every authorization. Not Savannah Caldwell, not Nathan Hartwell. Beverly. She looked at her phone, 9:47 p.m. Then she opened her contacts and found Sandra, the wedding coordinator, not Savannah's mother, the other Sandra, and pressed call. Hi, Beverly. I was just going over the timeline for tomorrow. I need to cancel everything, Beverly said. Her voice came out flat and perfectly steady, the way voices sometimes do when emotion goes so deep it circles back around to calm. The venue, the catering, the florist, the photographer, the band, everything under my name. I'm canceling it all. A sharp intake of breath on the other end. Beverly, are you sure? The wedding is tomorrow. I'm sure. She opened the binder to the first tab. I'll start with the venue. Can you give me the after-hours number for the Ashford Estate coordinator? She made 8 phone calls in 40 minutes. The Ashford Estate, canceled. Magnolia Catering, canceled. Bloomfield Florals, canceled. James Whitfield Photography, canceled. The Reston String Quartet, canceled. The cake designer in Greenville, canceled. The shuttle company handling guest transportation, canceled. The specialty lighting vendor who had spent 3 days rigging the venue's garden terrace, canceled. Each call followed the same rhythm. The cautious voice on the other end, the gentle pushback about cancellation fees and short notice and contractual obligations, and Beverly's steady, unvarying response. I am the contract holder. My name is on every document. I am within my rights. Most of them, after a pause, said some version of, understood. We'll process the cancellation. She sat in her car and canceled a fairy tale, 1 phone call at a time, and when it was done she sat in the silence for a moment and noticed that her hands had stopped shaking somewhere around the 5th call and had not started again. She drove home. She was at her kitchen table with a cup of tea going cold in front of her when the knock came. 1:15 a.m., hard and urgent. Mom! Nathan's voice muffled through the door. Open up! We need to talk. Beverly did not move. Mom, I know you're in there. A pause, then louder. You can't do this. This is our wedding. She sat with her hands folded in her lap and listened to his voice and waited for what she needed to hear. Some crack in it. Some fracture where the real thing might come through. Some version of, Mom, are you okay? Mom, I'm sorry I didn't say anything. Mom, I should have defended you. You're ruining our lives, he said. Do you understand that? Beverly looked at the cold cup of tea. She thought about Ray, about the travel fund, about 20 years of someday. No, Ryan, she said quietly, to no one. It was never yours. The knocking stopped eventually. She heard footsteps retreat down the front walk, the sound of a car door, an engine turning over. She sat there for a long time after he was gone. The email from American Express arrived at 11:23 the following morning, while Beverly was sitting at her desk responding to the cascade of texts that had been arriving since daybreak. Most of them some version of what's happening or have you lost your mind? Or Beverly, please just call them. The subject line read, Booking confirmation. 4 seasons, Bora Bora, 12 nights. Beverly read it once, then again. Then a third time, more slowly, her eyes moving over each line with the careful attention of someone who already suspects what they are going to find but needs to be certain before they act. Thank you for completing your reservation. Guests, Nathan Hartwell and Savannah Caldwell. Check-in, June 28th. Total charge to American Express card ending in 4471, $31,400. Her American Express card, ending in 4471. She had not made this reservation. Beverly set the phone face down on the desk. She pressed her palms flat against the surface and breathed in for 4 counts and out for 4 counts, the way her doctor had taught her years ago for moments of acute stress. And then she picked the phone back up and opened her banking app. The charges went back 6 weeks. Bora Bora Resort, $31,400. Toomey luggage set, limited edition, $4,200. Serenity pre-wedding spa retreat, $2,800. Wire transfer, recipient account unknown, $9,000. Total, $47,400. Not one of them authorized by Beverly. Not one preceded by a phone call, a text, a conversation of any kind. Savannah had Beverly's card number. Beverly remembered now, viscerally, a Sunday dinner 3 weeks ago when she'd left her wallet on the kitchen counter while she went to check on the roast. And Savannah had been in the kitchen alone for 6, maybe 7 minutes. 7 minutes. That was all it had taken. Beverly sat very still for a long moment. Outside her apartment window, the neighborhood was going about its ordinary Saturday. A dog barking somewhere, the sound of a lawnmower 2 houses down, a child calling out to another child in the bright, careless way children do when nothing in their world has yet gone wrong. Then she did 3 things. First, she called American Express, reported every charge as fraudulent, and had the card immediately frozen. Second, she opened a new folder on her phone and began taking screenshots. The hotel confirmation, the luggage receipt, the spa booking, the wire transfer record. She labeled the folder, for Patricia even though she hadn't called Patricia yet, because on some level she already knew that was the next step, and Beverly had always been a woman who labeled things before she needed them. Third, she called Diane Forsythe. Diane answered on the second ring the way she always did, as though she had been waiting. Bev, I heard. Are you okay? I need the name of the best attorney you know, Beverly said. Not family law. I need someone who handles fraud. A beat of silence. Then Diane said, with the calm of a woman who had been Beverly's friend for 31 years and understood exactly what that sentence meant coming from her. Her name is Patricia Owens. I'll text you her number right now. Beverly looked around her small, tidy kitchen. The plants on the windowsill she watered every Thursday. The photograph of Ray on the shelf above the toaster. The cold cup of tea from last night still sitting where she'd left it. She had spent 58 years being the woman who handled things quietly, who smoothed edges and absorbed costs and told herself that keeping the peace was the same as keeping love. She picked up the cold tea and poured it down the sink. That woman, she thought, is retired. Patricia Owens's office was on the 4th floor of a building downtown that smelled like good coffee and old wood. The kind of building that had been there long enough to mean something, with brass fixtures on the elevator doors and windows that looked out over the river. Beverly arrived at 9 o'clock on Monday morning wearing the gray blazer she had always considered her most serious piece of clothing and carrying the navy binder under her arm like a shield. Patricia herself was not what Beverly had expected, though she couldn't have said exactly what she had expected. 52 years old, maybe. Silver hair cut close to the head with a precision that suggested she had long ago stopped spending energy on things that didn't matter. A single piece of jewelry. A Cartier tank watch that was clearly old and clearly beloved. She stood when Beverly walked in and shook her hand with the firm grip of someone who understood that first impressions are a form of information. Sit down, she said. Tell me everything. So Beverly did. She laid it out in the order it happened, the way you lay out evidence rather than the way you tell a story. No editorializing, no reaching for sympathy, just the sequence of facts. The 14 months of planning, the $78,000, the rehearsal dinner, Savannah's words in front of 16 people, Nathan's silence, the parking lot, the phone calls, the 8 canceled vendors, and then the American Express statement and the $47, $400 that Savannah had moved through Beverly's account in 6 weeks without a single word of acknowledgement. Patricia listened without interrupting. She took notes on a yellow legal pad, her handwriting small and dense, and her face gave away nothing except that she was paying very close attention to every syllable. When Beverly stopped talking, Patricia put her pen down. "You've done nothing wrong," she said. "I want to be clear about that before we go any further. Every contract is in your name. Every payment originated from your accounts. Legally, they have nothing. If they want a wedding, they will have to construct one themselves from the ground up." Beverly exhaled slowly. She hadn't realized how tightly she'd been holding her breath until that moment. "What about the charges?" she asked. "The $47,400. Patricia's expression didn't change, but something behind her eyes sharpened. "That is not a family dispute," she said evenly. "That is fraud. Specifically, unauthorized use of a financial instrument. The fact that the person who did it was about to become your daughter-in-law is irrelevant to the law. It is irrelevant to me, and I would encourage you to let it become irrelevant to you as well." Can they argue she had implied permission? That his family? They can argue whatever they like. Patricia picked up her pen again. "I'll dismantle it." She said it the way someone states a fact about the weather. Not boastful, simply accurate. "Here's what we're going to do. First, I'm filing a formal fraud complaint with American Express and initiating civil recovery proceedings against Savannah Caldwell. Second, I'm drafting a cease and desist covering harassment and defamation. I assume there will be social media activity once the reality of the situation sets in." "There already is," Beverly said. Patricia nodded once, unsurprised. "Third, and I need you to hear this carefully, there is a savings account in Nathan Hartwell's name that you opened and have been funding. Is that correct?" Beverly felt the specific located dread of someone who already suspects what is coming, but has not yet allowed themselves to think it all the way through. "Yes. I opened it when he started college. I've been adding to it over the years. For emergencies," I told him. "For whatever he needed. I need you to look at this." Patricia slid a printed spreadsheet across the desk. Beverly looked. The account had held $23,500 as recently as 6 weeks ago. It now held $5,500. $18,000, withdrawn in careful increments, never more than $3,000 at a time, spaced 3 to 5 days apart, beginning 2 days after Beverly had wired the final payment to the Ashford Estate venue. 2 days after, Beverly stared at the numbers on the page. The room was very quiet. Through the window behind Patricia's desk, the river moved in the slow, indifferent way rivers do. "He knew," Beverly said, not a question. "The pattern of withdrawals suggests planning," Patricia said carefully, "not impulse." Beverly thought about Nathan standing at her door at 1 a.m, voice tight with outrage. "You're ruining our lives. You can't do this. This is our wedding." She had stood on the other side of that door and waited for him to ask if she was okay, and he never had, and now she understood why. He already knew why she wasn't okay. He had known before the rehearsal dinner ever started. "Freeze it," Beverly said. Her voice was steady. "Whatever is left, freeze it today." "I'll have it done within the hour," Patricia made a note. "Beverly." She waited until Beverly looked up. "I know this is not only about money." Beverly said nothing. "I've had clients in situations like this before. The financial piece is almost never the hardest part." Patricia's voice was not unkind. It was direct in the way that real kindness sometimes is. Not cushioned, just honest. "But I need you to let me handle the legal side completely. No calls to Nathan, no responses to Savannah's posts, no explanations offered to family members who are pressuring you. You say nothing. You let me be your voice until this is resolved." Beverly looked at this woman she had met 40 minutes ago and thought, Ray would have liked her. "Understood," Beverly said. She signed the authorization forms. Her hand did not shake once. The phone calls started before she got home. Dorothy first, Beverly's younger sister, calling from Columbia with the particular brand of concern that had always felt slightly more like management than love. "Beverly, honey, I just got off the phone with Nathan. He's beside himself. I don't know everything that happened at the rehearsal, but surely—" "Dorothy." Beverly kept her eyes on the road. "Did Nathan tell you what Savannah said to me?" In front of everyone?" A pause. "He said it got heated, that you both said things." "I didn't say anything," Beverly said. I left. "Well, yes, but—" "Beverly, you've canceled the entire wedding. You have to understand how that looks." "How does it look?" Another pause, longer this time, like you're making a point at the expense of their happiness. Beverly let the silence run for a moment before she said quietly, "I'll talk to you soon, Dorothy," and ended the call. Gerald Caldwell called 20 minutes later. She almost didn't answer, but something made her, some need to hear what he would say, to know whether any part of this family understood what had happened. "Beverly." His voice had the oiled ease of a man accustomed to talking his way through rooms. "I think we've gotten off on the wrong foot here. Savannah can be passionate. You know how young people are. But surely we can all sit down and—" "Gerald," Beverly said, "does your daughter have access to my credit card information?" Silence. "Because $47,400 has moved through my account in the last 6 weeks without my authorization. Charges to hotels in Bora Bora, luggage, spa treatments, a wire transfer to an account I don't recognize." The silence on Gerald Caldwell's end changed quality, hardened, became something different than the silence of surprise. "I'm sure there's been some kind of misunderstanding," he said finally. "There's no misunderstanding," Beverly said. "You should speak with a lawyer, Gerald. You'll probably be hearing from mine." She ended the call. Raymond Jr., a second cousin of Nathan's who Beverly had always found harmless but dim, sent a text. "Aunt Beverly, I don't want to take sides, but people are saying some stuff, and I just wanted to reach out and say I hope you'll do the right thing." Beverly read it, set the phone on the counter, and made herself a cup of tea. The right thing. She turned the phrase over in her mind while the kettle boiled. She had been doing the right thing for 58 years. Doing the right thing had cost her $78,000 and a parking lot full of tears and 8 phone calls after midnight. At some point, the right thing and the convenient thing for other people needed to stop being treated as synonyms. 3 days after the rehearsal dinner, Patricia called Beverly with the kind of voice that delivers information carefully, like handling something that might still be warm. "I need you to look at your bank statements again," she said. "Specifically the wire transfer, the $9,000. Beverly pulled up the account on her laptop. "I'm looking." "The receiving account," Patricia said. "I had my paralegal trace it. It's registered to a Dorothy Ann Hartwell." Beverly did not say anything for a very long time. Outside her window, a neighbor was walking a yellow Labrador down the sidewalk. The dog stopped to investigate something in the grass with enormous seriousness, and the neighbor waited patiently, and the whole small scene was so ordinary and so distant from where Beverly was sitting that it felt almost hallucinatory. "My sister," Beverly said. "Yes. Savannah paid my sister $9,000. Beverly said it slowly, following the shape of it. "With my own money. It appears to have been framed as a personal loan, based on the transfer notation. But the timing, 3 weeks before the rehearsal dinner." "Yes." Beverly thought about Dorothy's phone call. "Surely we can work this out. You've always been strong-willed. Maybe Emma felt threatened. Not Emma, Savannah, but the rest of it, the gentle pressure, the careful reframing of Beverly's pain as Beverly's personality flaw." She thought about all the times over the past year when Dorothy had nudged her toward accommodation, toward patience, toward being the bigger person, and she understood now that those nudges had not been coming from nowhere. Savannah had been building a coalition, inside Beverly's own family, with Beverly's own money, long before anyone arrived at Rosewood Private Dining with white peonies and a hidden agenda. "Beverly," Patricia said carefully, "are you all right?" "I'm fine," Beverly said. And the remarkable thing was that she mostly meant it. The pain was real, but it was clarifying pain, the kind that strips away confusion and leaves you with only the clean, stark outline of what is actually true. "What do we do?" "We add it to the civil complaint," Patricia said. "And we send the cease and desist today. I've already drafted it." The cease and desist went out that afternoon, certified mail to Savannah Caldwell, email to Gerald and Sandra Caldwell, 1 copy to the Caldwell's home address. Patricia had included the American Express fraud documentation, the bank statements showing the unauthorized wire transfers, and a detailed accounting of every charge made to Beverly's accounts without authorization. At 4:17 p.m., Savannah's Instagram video disappeared. Beverly was sitting in her living room when she got the notification that the post had been removed, and she felt, not triumph exactly, something quieter, the relief of a thing being acknowledged without having to fight for the acknowledgement. Nathan called 6 times between 4 and 6 o'clock. Beverly watched his name appear and disappear on her screen and let Patricia's instructions hold. You say nothing. Savannah sent 3 texts in rapid succession. You think you've won something. You haven't. Then, Nathan will never forgive you for this. Then, you're going to die alone and it's your own fault. Beverly screenshot all 3, forwarded them to Patricia, and put the phone face down on the coffee table. Then Gerald Caldwell called back. The oiled ease was entirely gone. What replaced it was something smaller and more honest. The voice of a man who has just been informed that the ground he has been standing on is not as solid as he believed. Beverly, I think we need to talk about resolving this privately. That would be a conversation between your lawyer and mine, Beverly said. Patricia Owens. I'll give you her number. She read out the number and hung up. She sat for a while in the quiet of her living room, in the apartment she had moved into after selling the house on Caldwell Street, in the life she had rebuilt from the wreckage of losing Ray, and she thought about all the things she had quietly absorbed over the years in the name of keeping peace. Every slight swallowed, every boundary crossed without consequence. Every time she had handed someone something precious and watched them handle it carelessly and told herself that love meant you kept giving anyway. Then she went to the bookshelf in the hallway and found the shoebox where she kept photographs, and she stood there for a few minutes going through them until she found the one she was looking for. Nathan at 7 years old, asleep in the back seat after a day at Lake Hartwell, the one Ray had always said was named after them, which was not true, but which Nathan had believed with complete conviction until he was 9. In the photograph, Nathan's head was tilted against the window, his mouth slightly open, one hand still loosely holding a moon snail shell he'd found on the shoreline that afternoon. Beverly remembered the weight of him when Ray had carried him inside, how Nathan hadn't woken up even once, how completely and absolutely he had trusted that he would be taken care of. She looked at the photograph for a long time. Then she put it back in the shoebox, put the shoebox on the shelf, and went to make dinner. The boy in that photograph was real. The love she had for him was real. But the man who had stood 8 feet away at Rosewood Private Dining and looked at the floor while she was told to leave, that man had made his choices with full knowledge and full intention, and Beverly was no longer willing to pretend that love was a reason to keep absorbing the consequences of other people's choices indefinitely. It doesn't stop being love, she thought, when you stop accepting the damage. Nathan came to the apartment on Thursday afternoon. Beverly heard the doorbell and stood in the kitchen for a moment, deciding. Then she walked to the door and opened it. He looked tired. She noticed that first, the shadows under his eyes, the slight slump in his shoulders, the way he was holding himself together with visible effort. He had his father's jawline and his father's height, and she had loved him for 31 years with the specific ferocity that only mothers understand, the love that lives in the body as much as the mind, that doesn't require logic or merit to sustain itself. None of that had changed. "Can I come in?" he said. She stepped back. He walked into the living room and stood near the window, and she stood near the hallway, and the space between them was small in feet but felt like something much larger. "I know you're upset," he began. "Nathan," her voice was gentle but completely firm. "I know about the account." He went still. "All of it," she said. "The $18,000, the timing of the withdrawals. I know." The calculation moved across his face the way it had at the rehearsal dinner, that fast, private recalibration behind the eyes. And Beverly understood, watching it, that this was who Nathan had become. Not a man who had made a terrible mistake in a weak moment. A man who weighed things. "Mom," he said, and his voice changed, softened, reached for something. "I can explain." "You don't have to," she said. "I'm not asking for an explanation." He blinked. That had not been what he expected. "I'm asking you to leave," she said. "Not in anger. I want to be clear about that. I'm asking you to leave because we have lawyers involved now, and because everything I needed to understand about where we stand I already understand." "You're serious?" His voice hardened again. "You're actually going to—" "I already have," Beverly said simply. He looked at her. Really looked at her. Maybe for the first time in years. and she held his gaze and did not fill the silence with reassurance or apology, or any of the 100 softening things she would have reflexively offered once. Nathan left. He didn't slam the door. He closed it with a quiet, controlled click that was somehow worse. Beverly stood in the middle of her living room for a long moment. Then she walked to the window and watched his car pull out of the lot and turn onto the street and disappear. Loving someone and protecting yourself from them, she thought, are not mutually exclusive. I just needed 58 years to learn it. She booked the resort on Friday morning. Not Bora Bora. She would not give that destination the weight of association, would not let Savannah Caldwell's fraudulent reservation permanently contaminate a place she had never been. Instead, she found a small inn outside Asheville, North Carolina, tucked into the Blue Ridge Mountains, the kind of place that advertised itself with words like unhurried and restorative, and meant them without irony. A suite with a private balcony, a mountain view, breakfast included. She packed one bag, medium-sized. She had always overpacked for trips, and she made a deliberate decision not to this time, to bring only what she actually needed. Nothing carried out of habit or anxiety or the old compulsion to be prepared for every possible version of every possible thing. She left on Saturday morning before 7, while the neighborhood was still quiet. The wedding was scheduled for 2 o'clock. Beverly knew this because she had built the timeline herself, had typed it into a shared document 14 months ago, and sent it to every vendor with the careful, organized energy of a woman who understood that beautiful things don't happen by accident. They happen because someone cares enough to do the invisible work that makes them possible. She drove through the mountains with the windows down and the radio on low, an oldies station out of Hendersonville playing things from the 70s that she and Ray had danced to in their first apartment on a Saturday night with no furniture worth mentioning and more happiness than they knew what to do with. She checked into the inn at 11. The woman at the desk upgraded her to the corner suite without being asked. Something about Beverly's face apparently communicating that she was a person who needed a corner suite today, and Beverly accepted it with a gratitude that felt out of proportion to the gesture, but wasn't really when you considered everything. The suite had a deep soaking tub and a balcony that looked out over a ridge of blue-green mountains disappearing into soft haze. Beverly stood on that balcony for a long time, her hands wrapped around the railing, breathing in air that smelled like pine and recent rain, and nothing that needed her attention. At 1:30, she drew a bath. At exactly 2 o'clock, the hour when, in a parallel version of this Saturday, she would have been sitting in the front row of the Ashford Estates garden terrace, watching her son walk toward the rest of his life. Beverly Hartwell was submerged to the shoulders in a hot bath with a glass of sparkling water on the ledge, and Nora Jones playing softly from the small Bluetooth speaker she had remembered to pack because some habits of preparedness are worth keeping. Her phone had 14 unread messages. She knew this because the notification count was visible on the locked screen, but she did not unlock it. She let the number sit there, inert and powerless, and she closed her eyes and listened to the music and let the water hold her. Diane had sent one text that morning that Beverly had read before leaving home. "Thinking of you today. You are so much braver than you know." Beverly had not replied yet. She was saving it. The way you save something good. Something you want to return to when you're ready to fully receive it. She stayed at the inn for 3 nights. She hiked a trail Sunday morning that wound through a grove of old hemlocks and came out on a rock outcropping with a view that made her stand still for a full minute before she remembered to breathe. She ate dinner alone both evenings at a small table by the window in the inn's dining room, and she ordered things she actually wanted. The trout, the mushroom risotto, a glass of burgundy that cost more than she would normally have allowed herself. And she ate slowly and looked out the window and thought about nothing in particular and everything at once. On Sunday afternoon, sitting on her balcony with a book she was only half reading, she took a photograph of her own feet propped up on the railing, the mountains behind them going blue and gold in the late light, a glass of wine glinting at the edge of the frame. She looked at the photograph for a moment. Then she opened Instagram, the account she barely used, the one with 63 followers, mostly people from her garden club and a few old colleagues from the school district where she'd worked for 22 years, and she posted it. The caption was 4 words: "Best decision I ever made. No names, no context, no explanation." She put the phone away and went back to her book. By the time Beverly returned home Monday evening, the comment she hadn't posted had been posted for her. By the world. In the way the world sometimes does when a story has enough momentum and enough witnesses. It started, Diane told her later, with a single comment under one of Savannah's now-deleted posts, retrieved and shared in a wedding forum by someone who had screenshotted it before it disappeared. Didn't Beverly Hartwell pay for literally everything? I'm confused about who the victim is here. From there, the accounting began. Someone who worked at Magnolia Catering mentioned, in a comment that was careful but unambiguous, that the contract holder for the Myers-Whitaker wedding, she used the wrong name, a detail Beverly found oddly touching in its evidence of human imperfection, had been a Ms. Hartwell, and that Ms. Hartwell alone had had the legal authority to cancel. A bridesmaid who had been at the rehearsal dinner, not one of Savannah's close friends, one of the outer ring guests who owed no particular loyalty, posted a brief account of what she had witnessed. Not dramatic, not embellished, just I was there. I saw what happened. The story being told online is not the story I watched. And then the screenshots surfaced. Beverly never knew who released them. Patricia had a theory, Sandra Caldwell had a theory, Diane had 3 theories. But the email confirmation for the Four Seasons Bora Bora reservation, with the line charged to Beverly Hartwell's American Express clearly visible, found its way into a wedding gossip group with 40,000 members. And after that, the conversation moved at the speed and temperature of wildfire. Beverly did not read most of it. Diane summarized it for her over the phone on Tuesday morning. The general consensus had shifted entirely. The pity had migrated. The people who had called Beverly toxic were now using that word in the other direction. They're not being kind about it, Diane said carefully. The internet is not kind about anything, but they're not wrong. I don't need them to be right, Beverly said. I just needed to stop being publicly called a villain for something I didn't do. Well, Diane said, that part seems to be handled. Savannah's Instagram had gone private. Nathan's profile picture had disappeared. Gerald Caldwell, who had been loudly opinionated on Facebook about family loyalty as recently as the previous Wednesday, had gone entirely silent. Beverly made a note to forward everything to Patricia and then closed the browser. The call came on a Tuesday night, late, nearly 10 o'clock, a number Beverly didn't recognize, and she almost let it go to voicemail. Something made her answer. Beverly. The voice was quiet, slightly hoarse, as though the person on the other end had been crying recently or for a long time or both. This is Sandra Caldwell. Beverly sat up straighter in her chair. I know I don't have any right to call you, Sandra said. I'm not calling to ask for anything. I needed to say something to someone who deserved to hear it, and you're the only person I can think of. Beverly said nothing. She waited. Sandra's voice, when it came again, carried the specific exhaustion of someone who has been silent too long about too many things. Gerald has a gambling problem, she said. It's been going on for 11 years. We've lost most of what we had. Savannah grew up watching him, watching how he operated, how he managed people, how he found angles. A long pause. I should have protected her from that. I didn't. I don't know if I was too tired or too scared or just not strong enough. Probably all 3. Her voice thinned. When Savannah started seeing Nathan, Gerald saw an opportunity. He encouraged it. Not the relationship. The opportunity. I watched it happen and I didn't say anything, and I'm sorry, Beverly. I'm so sorry. Beverly sat in the lamplight of her quiet living room and listened to this woman dismantle the architecture of her own family's choices, and she felt not the satisfaction she might have expected, not vindication, not even relief exactly. Something more complicated. The sadness of recognizing that damage always has a history, that cruelty is almost always downstream from something else. Sandra, she said finally, can I ask you something? Yes. Did you know, before the rehearsal dinner, did you know what they were planning to do? A very long silence. I suspected, Sandra said. I didn't know the specifics. I told myself I didn't know because it was easier. Her voice broke slightly on the last word. I'm sorry. That's not good enough. I know it isn't. Beverly thought about this woman sitting across from her at the rehearsal dinner, refilling her wine glass with the quiet efficiency of long practice. The way she had said, I know, sweetheart, in a low murmur when Savannah was complaining. Not agreement, Beverly understood now. Exhaustion. The exhaustion of someone who has watched a wreckage in slow motion and has not found the way to stop it. Thank you for calling, Beverly said. That's all? Sandra sounded surprised. That's all, Beverly said gently. Take care of yourself, Sandra. She sat for a while after hanging up, in the particular silence that follows a conversation that has shifted something. The anger she had been carrying, the hard, cold, structural anger that had held her upright through the worst of it, loosened slightly, not into forgiveness, not yet, maybe not ever in the full sense of the word, but into something more spacious. The recognition that she was not the only person in this story who had been failed by someone they trusted. It didn't change what happened. It didn't change what she was going to do. But it changed the way she was going to carry it. She called Dorothy the next morning. Not from anger, not to wound. Beverly had spent enough of her life watching people use phone calls as weapons, and she had no interest in adding to that tradition. She called because Dorothy deserved the truth delivered directly, not through lawyers or secondhand accounts or the slow drift of family gossip. Dorothy answered on the third ring, her voice already cautious. "Beverly, I know about the $9,000, Beverly said. "Savannah paid you with my money. I have the bank records." Silence. "I'm not going to pretend I understand it fully," Beverly continued. "Maybe you needed the money. Maybe she told you a version of things that made it seem reasonable. I don't know, and honestly, Dorothy, I've stopped needing to know." She paused. "But I need you to understand that what you did, taking money from my account, through her, while telling me to be patient and be the bigger person, that was a betrayal, not a misunderstanding. A betrayal." "Beverly, I'm not calling to fight," Beverly said. "I'm calling to tell you that I love you, that I have loved you my whole life, and that I need time away from you. I don't know how much time. Maybe a lot." Her voice was steady, remarkably, completely steady. "I hope you'll use it to think about some things. I know I will." Dorothy started to say something. Beverly spoke over her, not unkindly. "Take care of yourself." She ended the call. She stood at the kitchen window for a moment, looking at the plants on the sill, the African violet that had been struggling since February and had recently, quietly, begun to put out new growth. She touched one of the small purple flowers with the tip of her finger. Even the things you almost lose, she thought, can come back if you give them the right conditions. 3 weeks later, Patricia called with the kind of voice that delivers good news the way good lawyers do. Plainly, without theater. "They've agreed to the repayment schedule," she said. "Full restitution of the $47,400 over 18 months. Savannah signed this morning. Gerald co-signed as guarantor." Beverly absorbed this. "And Nathan?" "The joint account is formally closed. He signed a waiver releasing any claim to the funds. His attorney, and I use the word loosely, it was a friend of Gerald's who I don't think has seen the inside of a courtroom since 2009, advised him that he had no viable counterposition, which was accurate." A brief pause. "It's done, Beverly. All of it." Beverly thanked her. She meant it genuinely and completely, not just for the legal outcome, but for the particular experience of being handled by someone competent, of having said, "Take care of this," and having it taken care of. After so many years of being the person who did all the taking care. She hung up and got her jacket. She drove to the park on Weston Road, the one with the old oak trees and the creek that ran along the eastern edge, the one she and Ray had brought Nathan to every Sunday morning when he was small, rain or shine, because Ray believed that children needed to learn early that the world was worth showing up for, regardless of the weather. She sat on the bench nearest the creek, the one with the iron armrests worn smooth by years of use, and she watched the water move. A father was pushing a stroller along the path nearby, talking on his phone in the distracted, warm way of someone delivering good news to someone they love. 2 older women walked past with a shared dog, a basset hound with ears that swept the pavement and the dignified expression of a creature who has made peace with its own absurdity. A small boy crouched at the edge of the creek throwing pebbles with the focused intensity of scientific inquiry. Beverly watched all of it. She thought about Ray. She thought about the travel fund, about the lighthouse magnet on the refrigerator, about the slow train across Canada and the cottage in Scotland, and the trip to Portugal that they had kept saying someday to until there were no more somedays left. She thought about how she had taken that money, their someday money, and poured it into a wedding that had become something she recognized now, clearly and without bitterness, as the final expression of a pattern she had spent decades enabling. The pattern of Beverly Hartwell giving everything she had to people who had learned to expect it without cost. Ray would not have blamed her. That was the thing about Ray. He never blamed her for loving too much. He had only ever wished she would love herself with even a fraction of the same generosity. She took her phone from her jacket pocket and called Diane. "Talk to me," Diane answered. She always answered like that. No preamble, just immediate presence. It was one of the things Beverly had always loved most about her. "Are you still interested in Portugal?" Beverly said. A beat of silence, then, "Beverly Ann Hartwell, are you serious right now?" "I'm looking at flights," Beverly said. "There's a good fare leaving out of Charlotte 2 weeks from Thursday. 12 days. Lisbon, then down to the Algarve, then back up through Porto." "I haven't been to Europe since 2018. "Neither have I. I need to find my passport." "You have 2 weeks." Diane laughed, full and unguarded, the laugh of a woman who has been waiting for this particular phone call for a long time. "Book it," she said. "Book both of us. I'll send you a check tonight." Beverly looked at the creek, at the small boy still throwing pebbles with undiminished commitment, at the mountains of blue in the distance beyond the tree line. "Ray always wanted to go," she said. "Then we'll go for him too," Diane said simply. Beverly booked the flights on the bench in the park, in the warm afternoon of an ordinary Thursday, with the sound of the creek and the distant laughter of the small boy and the steady, unhurried presence of a friend on the other end of the line who had never once told her to be the bigger person. 3 months later, Lisbon in the early morning smells like coffee and river water and something older than both, the particular scent of a city that has been standing long enough to have absorbed centuries of human life into its stone. Beverly learned this on the first morning, walking down from the hotel to a cafe 2 streets over that had 5 tables and no menu beyond what was written in chalk on a board above the counter. She ordered a coffee and a pastel de nata, the small custard tart that was everywhere in this city, that she had read about in the travel books Ray had kept on the shelf. And she sat at the window table and watched Lisbon wake up. Her Portuguese was non-existent, improving to embarrassing. She had been practicing from an app on her phone for 3 weeks before the trip and had achieved the ability to say good morning, thank you, where's the bathroom, and, inexplicably, given the level she was at, the fog is very beautiful today, a sentence she had not yet found occasion to use but remained prepared for. She attempted obrigada when the server brought her order and landed it somewhere in the vicinity of correctly, and the server smiled with the patience of someone who genuinely appreciated the effort, and Beverly felt the small, warm glow of a person attempting something new and finding the world forgiving about it. Diane arrived at the table 5 minutes later, slightly out of breath, carrying 2 postcards she had already found at a shop that apparently opened before 7. "One for you," she said, sliding a card across the table. "Vintage print of the Tagus, 1952. Beverly looked at it. The river, rendered in the flat, bright colors of mid-century illustration, blues and ochres and a yellow so saturated it almost vibrated. She thought about the lighthouse magnet. She thought about someday. "Thank you," she said. Diane sat down and flagged the server for a coffee and looked out the window with the expression of someone who has arrived exactly where they were supposed to be. Her phone buzzed. She looked at the screen. Nathan. Missed call. She held the phone in her hand for a moment. The weight of it, the familiar name, the old pull, all of it present, all of it acknowledged, none of it controlling. She placed the phone face down on the table. Not forever, maybe. She didn't know what forever looked like yet. Perhaps there would be a conversation someday, if Nathan arrived at it honestly, without strategy, with nothing to offer but the plain truth of what had happened and the genuine desire to reckon with it. Perhaps there would not. Beverly had stopped pretending she could know in advance what she would or wouldn't be capable of. What she knew was this. She was 58 years old, sitting in a cafe in Lisbon on a Thursday morning in September, with a custard tart and a vintage postcard and her oldest friend across the table, and the river was visible from the window. And somewhere in this city there was a train that ran north through vineyards and river valleys to Porto, and she had a ticket for it on Saturday, and she was going. She had spent decades writing checks, not just the financial kind, though there had been plenty of those, but the other kind, the checks drawn on patience and silence and self-erasure, the ones that left her account a little lighter every time, and that she had signed over and over again in the faith that love was supposed to work that way. She was done writing those. She bit into the pastel de nata. The custard was warm and slightly caramelized at the top and tasted in the way that good food in new places sometimes does, like the specific and unrepeatable flavor of a life that has finally, after a very long time, been reclaimed. She looked at Diane. Diane looked at her. "Well," Diane said. Well, Beverly said. Outside, Lisbon went on being Lisbon, ancient and beautiful and entirely indifferent to anyone's history, offering itself equally to everyone who arrived willing to show up for it. Beverly picked up the vintage postcard, turned it over, and wrote 4 words on the back in her careful, even handwriting. Ray, we made it.